Welcome to Horror TV. This is your host, Killenberg. Now, for this episode, I'm reviewing episode 7 of Bates Motel, which is titled The Man in Number 9. Alright, so we get a recap of what happened. Then we see a police car pull up. It's Alex Romero. Norma gets Norman out of the car. Alex gets out. He goes up to Dylan. Dylan gives him the gun. He finds Shelby's body on the steps. He says we better talk. We see them in the living room and hear Norma say that's the whole story. He explains he suspected Shelby of being corrupt a while back. He made up a story saying Shelby killed Keith Summers and he killed Shelby. Dylan asks what's this and points to his injury. Alex says you got in the way. Norma says Shelby said he shot Zhao in the woods. Alex says that happened before he got there. He asks if everyone understands. Norma shook her head. Alex says alright then, that's it, and got up. Dylan complains about getting injured and saving them, and Alex says that's it. Norma says that's it and hugs Norman. We see the opening. We see Norman and Bradley making out in bed. Bradley asks about his mom. Norman says she's downstairs and will never hear them. They get under the covers and continue. Norma walks in. She asks what he's doing. We see that it was a dream. He says just waking up. She says 7 days before they open. She says she loves the birds. He said the birds are great. Norman says they can do a lot in 7 days, so don't freak out. She says she's not freaking out. She's taking care of business. Norman says they don't have any reservations yet. She says they haven't even opened yet. He says it's hard to believe all that stuff is behind them. She says she knows it's hard to believe, but it is. She explains they have to trust Sheriff Romero, and they have to live their lives and be happy again. She asks him to fix the lattice before he goes to school. We see him removing part of it. We hear a dog bark. We see the dog under there. He says it's okay. He throws it some food. The dog starts eating. He says, "Come here, girl." The dog runs away. We see Norma cooking an egg. And Dylan walks in and she says good morning to him. He says, hey. She says he needs to eat to get his arm healed. He asks why she made him breakfast. She says she appreciates what he did for her. He says she's just happy things are going to be good now. He says he's still moving out. She says, "You are?" He says, "Yeah." She says, "Even after all I told you about your brother?" He says, "Yeah." He says he doesn't know how he can help her. She says fine, and she didn't expect him to help. She gets the trash. He offers to get it, but she says no. He grabs it and she says, "Fine, take out the trash." We see Dylan outside with the trash. We see people working on the windows and painting. Dylan takes the trash to the dumpster. He sees a car and it stops. He goes up to the car and the man rolls down the window. The man asks what happened to the Seafair Motel. Dylan says new owners. It's Bates Motel now. Dylan asks if he has a room, but says they're not open yet. The man asks about Keith Summers. Dylan says he's dead. The man says, "I see, thank you." We see Norman at school. He sees Bradley with 2 other girls. He goes up to them. She says, "Hey, Norman." He says, "You're back at school?" She says you can't hide behind death forever. One of the girls said she did her book report for her. The other one says they're going to be late. They head to class. He asks if he will see her later. She shrugged. We see Norma go to a restaurant. She asks for the manager. The woman says she'll get her. We see the manager. Norma tells her she owns the Bates Motel. She thought about having brochures for the restaurant in the motel, and them having one for the motel. She says they don't do that so much. Norma asks why not. She says she's very selective of what businesses she promotes in her restaurant. Norma asks if there's something wrong with her business. She tells Norma everyone knows. She even goes into great detail about what happened. Norma says she's innocent of that. The manager says she's sure she is, but people talked and it's a small town. We see Norma on a laptop. She's looking at the room reservations and there aren't any. She closes it and turns the lights off. She goes up to the door and picks up brochures. She puts the blinds down, but then sees a man at one of the rooms. She asks if she can help him. It's the guy that was talking to Dylan. He says he didn't mean to scare her. He was wondering what happened to the room reservation. He says his key won't work. She introduces herself. We find out his name is Jake Abernathy. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. She explains she had the locks changed and says they're not open yet. She says if he doesn't mind renovating, she can get him a new key. He says to number 9. She says it's fine and it says it's in the office. She says she'll get it. He stands there watching her. She gets it and gives it to him. He goes in and she says, "Have a nice night." She sounds nervous. Dylan drives up to the motel. He asks if someone was in the motel. She says yeah and explains what happened. She says she couldn't turn him away. Dylan says he saw him this morning. Dylan said he thought he was weird. Norma says she didn't think he was weird. Dylan asks if she got his info. She says she'll get it in the morning. Dylan says he'll handle it. She tells him to be polite. He knocks on the door. Jake answers and says yes. Dylan says they forgot his information. Jake says information. He says his information is already in the system. Dylan says it's a new system and they have to redo it. Jake shows him his driver's license. Dylan asks what kind of work he does. Jake says sales. Dylan asks what kind of sales. Jake says different kinds. Dylan asks for his credit card. Jake instead pulls out cash. You know that's a bad sign. He says that's enough for a few nights. We see Norma cleaning the steps. Dylan explains what happened. He asks what she's cleaning. She says blood. Dylan says stone's porous. Can't scrub blood out of it and it'll wear off in time. He says no one's gonna know it was there anyway. She says she'll know. Dylan tells her to let it go. She says she would like to, but everyone in town is talking about it. He says he thinks she's overreacting. She says if the motel doesn't do good, they'll be marked as failures. She continues scrubbing. He says you can't get blood out of stone and throws the cash down. Dylan and Norman walk out of a building. Dylan says he'll move out when his arm is healed. Norman says he can't go with him because he can't leave Norma the way she is. Dylan tells him it's okay. Norman sees Bradley. Dylan asks if he knows her. He says yes. Bradley walks up to Norman. They say hi to each other. Dylan introduces himself. She says her mom's out of town for a few days. She knew Dylan worked for Gil. She says her dad used to work for him. She said his name was Jerry Martin. Dylan says he's really sorry. She says thanks. Norman tells her that her food's gonna get cold. She says she'll see them. Dylan watches her and she looks back at him. They get in the truck. Dylan asks if that's the girl that texted him. He says yes. Dylan asks if he saw her again. He says not yet. He explained that she has stuff going on. Dylan says sure and starts the truck. We see Norma in bed. She sees something and gets up. She goes in Norman's room and he's asleep. She hears something again. She says, Dylan? She grabs a butcher knife in the kitchen. She continues looking around. She goes to the door. She doesn't see anyone, but it's windy out. We see Emma go to the front door. Norma answers. Emma asks if they have a dog, and we see a plate of food on the ground. She says not that she knows of. She asks if Norman's home. Norma says yeah and says she'll get him. Norman goes in his room. He's at a desk listening to music. He asks what. She says Emma's downstairs. He says he doesn't feel like going downstairs and says to tell her that he's sick or something. She says, you know that sweet girl likes you, right? He says maybe it's nicer not to lead someone on. She asks if he left dog food out. He says he saw a stray dog. She tells him not to do that and says they'll have every animal in the woods on the front porch. She closes the door. Norma goes downstairs and tells Emma Norman's not feeling good. She says sorry. Emma says no problem and walks out. She stops before going out though. She starts sniffling and says she has allergies today. Norma says she needs to get some windows and asks if she knows where it is. Emma says she'll give her directions. She asks her to come with her and says she'll buy lunch. Emma says yeah, okay. We see them in Norma's car. Norma tells her not to worry and Norman seems distracted because he's been going through some things. Emma says he seems kind of distant. Norma says she noticed it too. Norma asks if she knew what she's preoccupied with. Emma says she has an idea. She says she doesn't want to be talking after school. Norma says she understands. Norma says whatever it is, he'll get over it. Emma says she goes to school with it and doesn't know how fast he's going to get over her. Norma looks at her. She asks if he's sleeping with this girl. Emma says she doesn't know. Norma asks what she's like. Emma says she's the prettiest girl in school and popular and she's nice so you can't even hate her. Norma says she's a high school girl and she can't be that big of a deal. Emma offers to show her to her after they go window shopping. She says she takes a yoga class by their shop. They park. Norma says she was in high school once. She says teenage boys are not deep. She says she can't be all that. We see her in the yoga class. Norma says she knows her. She mentioned the time she asked for Norman. Norma imagines her doing sexual things with Norman. Emma asks if she's alright. Norma says let's go. We see Norma putting up an office sign. We see Norman putting up an office sign. He grabs a cookie and starts eating it. The dog comes back. Norman asks her if she's hungry. He throws a piece and she starts eating it. He throws another piece. He has one in his hand. He says you have to come get this one, Juno. Juno eats it out of his hand. Norma shows up and tells him he doesn't know anything about that dog and tells him to stay away from her. We see them doing dishes. Norman says the dog is safe. Norma says they can't take on a dog right now. He says he always wanted a dog. He says normal families have a dog. Norma says she's not taking care of her. Norman says she doesn't have to. He will. He puts dishes on the table. Norma asks to talk to him about something more important. He says, "Of course, mother." She tells him sex is a serious thing. Norman says okay and asks if they were talking about dogs. She tells him don't make jokes. She tells him to be careful. He says he will be. She tells him he doesn't know that girl well enough to be screwing her. He says she's a nice girl. Well, she says she doesn't think nice girls come to your doorstep looking for a guy one day after he moves in, or sleep with someone they barely know. Norman asks how she knows who she is. She says, "Bradley Martin, I know, okay?" She asks if he knows if having sex affects a woman's physical being. He says he wasn't dabbling around and says he likes her. He said he really likes her. She says okay. She takes off her apron. She mentions hiring Emma. He asks why she hired her. She says she needs help. He thinks it's to put them together. He says, "So you're going to pick out my girlfriends?" She says it's not like Bradley's your girlfriend. He asks why not. She says they don't go out or anything. He says that's because her dad just died. He gets mad and walks out. We see him go outside. She tells him to go back inside. He says he's almost 18 and says he doesn't need to tell her. She tells him to be back there. He continues walking. She tells Norman and goes back in the house. She slams and kicks the door. He goes to Bradley's house. He sees her through the window. He rings her doorbell. She gets up and answers it. She opens the door and asks what's up. He says he thought they should talk. She says she has a lot of homework. He says they need to talk. She says okay. He says he knows how they feel about each other. He says he knows they have a connection. He mentions her not answering his texts. He tells her she should break up with Richard. He says we're together, right? She says she doesn't feel that way about him. But she says, "I shouldn't have done it with someone like you." He says, "Someone like me?" He walks away. She yells, "Norman." She gets her coat and starts following him. He repeats what Norma told him to himself. He stops and she catches up. She asks if he's okay. He turns around and says, "I don't think you're a nice girl." She hugs him and says she's really sorry. He says he has to go and walks away. We see Norma in the office looking at a laptop. Jake comes in. He says he didn't mean to startle her. He asks when they open. She says a few days. He says he likes it better than when Keith Saunders ran it. He asks if they booked a lot of the reservations. She says not as much as she hoped. He says it's hard to get started, but that's what makes or breaks a business like that. He says he does business with a lot of different people in the general area and offered to spread the word. She says that would be great, thank you. He says his pleasure. He said he would love to have the same arrangement he had with Keith if that's possible. He explains he needs entire blocks of rooms. She says that's great. He says it's other people he works with. She asks what kind of work. He says sales. He says they like their privacy, so there's no need to clean the rooms or anything. She says it's nothing illegal, right? He says it's nothing illegal. She says then they're booked. He walks out. We see Norman walking down the street. We see Juno standing in front of the motel. He calls her. A car started driving by. He tells her to stay, but she walks to him. She gets hit. The driver runs her over. The driver gets out and says he didn't see her. Norma runs up to him and yells, "Norman." He says he killed his dog. She tells him to get out of the street. He picks Juno up. Norma asks what he's doing. He says Emma's dad can fix dead things. The driver asks if he's alright. Norma says yes, he's alright. Norma says she's dead, no one can fix her. She says this is crazy. He yells it's not crazy. She says she'll drive him. He says he was wrong. She looks back. He says about everything. She hugs him and tells him she's sorry. He tells her to get in the car. She says okay and she runs to the car. And that's the end. So yeah, pretty good episode actually. This is the second part of season 1. I mean, this is still season 1, but it kind of goes into another storyline. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this episode of Horror TV. Join me again for episode 9 of Horror TV.